Hey guys, my name is Isaac Barber from Huntington University. I'm the Associate Dean of Student Engagement here at Huntington. Some of you just popped in from the last session, so I just definitely want to welcome you, and I just want to welcome everyone to this session. And so without further ado, we'll just jump in. This session is titled The Lasso Effect. The big portion of this session will just be spent talking about the TV show Ted Lasso. If you haven't seen the TV show Ted Lasso, it's one of my favorite shows. Which means you probably have an Android or Samsung or a Google phone or something like that. And I just want to implore you that even though I don't receive a kickback from Apple, you should probably work on some of those changes. It just makes for a happier life, and then your Apple using friends will just appreciate you a lot more because they don't have to revert to Snapchat, Facebook, or just seeing those green text messages come across the street. And so if this is the leverage that you needed to switch over to an iPhone, then like you're welcome, congratulations. But since we're talking about Ted Lasso is essentially this figure that you may see a lot of quotes on social media. You may see lots of quotes passed around through your group chat or something like that. But essentially, we want to talk about Ted Lasso from the standpoint of your role as student leaders on campus. We know that a lot of you are sacrificing time. We know a lot of you guys are sacrificing effort. And we know that some of you are just sacrificing time where you can be spending different internships and different things like that. And you're wondering, like, okay, what is my next move? How am I actually going to use some of the skills that I'm learning and the skills that I'm developing now to actually get that job? And that's what a lot of this session is going to be spent using. But since we know, we've already established that there are some people who have not seen the show Ted Lasso, we can talk about who Ted Lasso is. Ted Lasso is a soccer coach in the Premier League in London. But his resume is essentially none of a soccer coach. He's an American from Wichita, Kansas. I don't know if you've ever been to Wichita, Kansas. I know there's some people on this call right now that may be from Wichita, Kansas. Shout out to Wichita, Kansas. I spent some time in Kansas City myself. But let me tell you, Wichita, Kansas is not Kansas City. Okay, Wichita, Kansas is a college town, but it's not necessarily a big city. He was a football coach in that. He was a football coach in that town. I think it was something like middle school. It could be high school, but it was middle school coach. He essentially gets fired from coaching that team and then gets basically placed in London where he's coaching the soccer team. He says one time, you can fill 2 internets with what I don't know about football. Football meaning soccer, fake football, okay? This is one of those things in which like he takes this job in this foreign place and he doesn't actually know what's going on. Okay. And a lot of you may be wondering, like, okay, this leadership role that I've had over the last few months, some of you are juniors and seniors, and you've been in a role or some type of role over the last 2 or 3 years, and you're wondering, how can I actually work to leverage this role to get the job that I actually want? And so we're going to use the phrase leverage like lasso. We basically have 4 key principles that we'll use to basically leverage the job that you're doing right now to leverage those to get into the internship that you want to get into the job placement that you want to even get into the graduate school that you want to. Because a lot of times when you have to make a resume to get into graduate school, you have to be able to talk about those experiences as if this is something that directly translate and will propel you to be a great employee or a great coworker or a great teammate. Leverage like lasso point number 1, identify your own strengths. One of the things that Ted does so well, and he implores other people to do well, is kind of take a look at themselves, do a self inventory of kind of the things that they want to contribute. One of my favorite books by Richard Bowles is What Color is Your Parachute? What Color is Your Parachute is one of the leading books for anyone who is seeking a job, right? You can be seeking a job in your field, you can be seeking a job outside of your field. One of the book's prides is that like they have a lot of people who have not been working for a long time that want to get back into work, or people who they're looking for a complete career change. That's what this book is tailored to do. And so this book is really popular among college students or career advisors because it kind of gives people, readers, these tools on how to navigate a job search. But one of the most compelling quotes in this book is right here. Always define what you want to do with your life and what you have to offer to the world in terms of your favorite talents, gifts, skills, not in terms of a job title. And so no, like we'll go through the search. You guys will go through the search and say, like, okay, what do I actually want to do? What jobs are out there? Some of you are in the senior scramble that doesn't involve a relationship. You're in the senior scramble to find a job, right? And so it's about what you actually want to do. But what you actually want to do, you want to make sure those things align with your talents, your gifts, and your passion. And so we talk about our action steps. The biggest action step I would have for you, if you don't take anything else from the session, is create an inventory of your strengths and talents. Survey those strengths and talents and survey and see if those strengths and talents align with your passions, right? Then survey the vocation you actually want to pursue. And I know a lot of you are just like, hey, I don't look at the job that I want to have after college as my vocation. I look more at the extracurricular activities as my vocation. And that's fine. Same rules apply. Are those strengths, talents, and passions actually align with the things that you want to do after college? Are they actually aligned with just like, hey, I want to pursue a work. I want to pursue a work as an educator. I want to teach middle school math, but you don't like middle school students. You don't like kids. You don't even like math, right? And so align your strengths and passions, whether you're an Enneagram person, if you're a Clifton Strength School, if you're a Myers-Briggs Schools, survey your friends. It's like, hey, what are some things that I'm good at? What are some things that I'm passionate at? And actually create that inventory so you can get a more the development of yourself and not just some of the things that you think you want to do, or it's like, hey, I spent the last 3 or 4 years studying this thing. That's not a death sentence in terms of, hey, I've spent my entire college career studying biochemistry. I took A&P. I was really unhappy for 3 semesters because I had to take all those courses. That's not necessarily a death sentence. It's like, hey, you got all this information about anatomy. You can still go and pursue the things that bring you joy and things that make you happy. The next thing, understand the work you do and how it applies. And so we talk about our strengths, but we also want to understand the work that you do and how it applies. And so a lot of times we see students all the time. We see students all the time that talk about like, hey, like I'm just an event planner. Like this is just something I do for fun. There's something I do on the side. Or hey, I'm an RA. And the most prominent thing that my students think that I do is hand them toilet paper every now and then. That's unfair because like at that point we're only allowing students to define what we do or what we provide. You want to understand what you do and how it applies, right? And so when I talk about action items, we'll spend probably too much time, a bit more time talking about action items. But what do you actually want to do post college? Right. Let's develop some things like we talked about our strengths. If you don't actually know, that's a big part of where developing that inventory of what your strengths and what your passions are comes in handy because that essentially informs what do you actually want to do once you leave college, right? I know some of you are just like, hey, my mom said I'd be a great nurse one day, and so you want to make the move to become a nurse, but maybe that's not necessarily something that you want to do. Or again, like we talked about, it's like, hey, I'm be a nurse in my work time. But then my spare time, I'm going to do some work for nonprofits. That's also great. But what do you actually want to do post college? Who is the post college you? Right. Once you graduate, once they say your name, what kind of person do you want to be? We see every year during the student orientation, we have a bunch of freshmen and transfers who essentially want to reinvent themselves. Once you leave college, you get that same opportunity again. How do you want to reinvent yourself? Okay. And so look at what do you actually want to do? Then look at those job descriptions, right? Look at different job descriptions. And I put a question mark there largely because it's just like it's continued to be a question of what are some things that you actually want to do? You're going to be faced once you start looking at those different job descriptions of is this something that I actually want to do for the rest of my life? And like one of my favorite TV shows, Daria. She said they forced me at 18 years old to determine what I want to do for the rest of your life, right? That's unfair, right? I had to do it. We all have. If you navigate the college experience, at some point you'll have to do it. But you look at the different job descriptions to see, like, is this something that I actually want to do, right? And then you want to work with your supervisor to determine how you can develop those experiences. Once you start to narrow down, like, here are different jobs that I see myself doing, or here's some different things that I actually want to participate in. Some of that may require a major change, and I apologize to your advisors ahead of time. But some of that may require a major change, but a lot of that is about developing skill, right? If you've been studying education for the last 3 years, right, and you want to become a doctor, that's going to require more school, right? But there are a lot of things that it's just like this is a skill based program, right? This is a skill based job that you need to hold. And then you want to just work with your supervisor. I want to develop these skills right away. I want to develop some of these experiences as my advisor, as my supervisor. These are some different kind of responsibilities that I would like that I currently don't have. That's what I mean when I talk about understand the work you do and how it applies. Because if you're currently doing things in your role and it's like, this doesn't necessarily set me up well, there may be things in your role that you're currently exploring that you could actually gain more responsibility. And you're just like, hey, I want to become more organized, or I need to learn how to work to you excel in reality. I need help working with budgets. I need experience working with budgets. Work with your supervisor and work to acknowledge your versatile skill set. Become a person who's just like, all right, this is what you're looking for during your interview. You can say like, this is a way that I directly applied this skill, or you can put on your resume, I am proficient in budget management, I'm proficient in conflict resolution, because these are a lot of skills that people are looking for, and they'll put in their job description like, hey, we're looking for people with great conflict resolution, we are looking for people who understand project management and different things like that. Okay. Point number 3, embrace development. Again, what color is your parachute? He says, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? A lot of times, what happens is we are forced into this role. This happens a lot of times, and we warn our students, just like, hey, you're applying to be an RA for the second year in a row. You need to embrace that this experience may not be like your last experience. Looking for different ways to grow and looking for different ways to develop. And like you said, it's like God, give me the wisdom to know what the difference is, right? There are some things that we know that we can change, and we know that some things that we can change. The things that we can change is how we embrace our own development. That's one thing about Ted Lasso. He gets here, and I don't want to act like this is a spoiler, but you guys already know. It's like, hey, he takes this experience, and they just start to lose a bunch of games, right? But he embraces development, and his willingness to embrace development becomes super, super contagious, right? Everyone else then becomes development, and then they became a better team, right? At the end of the season, the entire season kind of led up to like, hey, he's probably gonna get fired because he's so bad at his job, but he developed so well that he ends up coming back for another year. That's a spoiler alert, but they now have 3 seasons, and so you can probably imagine that he probably kept his job, right? But because he embraced development at such a high level, it became a place in which there was no level of failure for him because every lesson was a lesson that he could learn. Okay. And action. Again, work with your supervisor on the things you want to work on. And you may be thinking like, hey, bro, I don't know you, but my supervisor is not someone who is easy to work with. And I understand that, but I think there's a level of accountability that your supervisor has to have, right? In one facet, that if you feel like you're not being developed by your supervisor, I think that's a conversation that you guys need to have. One, because although you are reporting to this person, you're still a customer, right? At some level, you guys work in student development or student life, and a massive key is your development of student, right? You are, even though you collecting checks from the university, you're still the customer, right? And so at some place you say like, hey, there's level of accountability in which like I feel like I'm not being developed properly, and you can have that conversation with your supervisor in terms of how you can develop. That supervisor may come with a fair criticism of where you need to be developed or an unfair criticism, but that's something where you can be prepared to have that conversation. Don't wait for your mid-semester evaluation to learn what you need to get better at, or your mid-year evaluation. For some of you, the end of the year evaluation, right? Don't wait on that to get better, because a lot of times we work, we navigate, we try to make it happen. And a lot of us are afraid of feedback, and sometimes we get inappropriate or feedback with no context, or feedback where it's too late. You want to create an environment of feedback in which you're constantly working to get that feedback. The last piece, where do you want expertise again? Like we talked about in the last point, there may be spaces in which, like, hey, you currently don't have any experience or you currently don't have any expertise. You can ask your supervisor and work with your supervisors, like, hey, can I take some of the load of the budget, or can you just work with me as you work through the budget? Hey, I would really need help with conflict management and conflict resolution. That roommate conflict that you dealt with last week, I would like more experience with roommate conflict. And so the next time, can you coach me through how to handle a roommate conflict? A lot of that is how you work to build that resume and how you build that skill, so that once you leave, you get into the room, and not only can you put that on your resume, but you can also answer those questions once you get into the job interview. Last one, be a goldfish.
Hey, Sam, wait a sec. I'm sorry. You know what the happiest animal on earth is? It's a goldfish. You know why? No. It's got a 10-second memory. Be a goldfish, Sam.
So yes, super, 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 super weird quote. But he says be a goldfish because it's a matter of positivity, having a positive outlook on life, but also recognizing that like there will be spaces in which you'll mess up, and especially during the job search. When you're pursuing post college, or when you're pursuing graduate schools, or even in your current roles right now, there is a level of imposter syndrome that pops up. And one of the crazy things about imposter syndrome is that imposter syndrome is a space that forces you to be negative. Imposter syndrome is a space that forces you only to focus on places in which you messed up. But when he says be a goldfish, is that some things that you just have to realize that you do have strengths. And so you can identify yourself based off your strengths. You can identify yourself based off of the places that you want to be and the places that you want to go, and actually work to pursue those things. We'll talk more in the breakout session, but those are just 4 quick points that I just want to leave you all with in terms of leveraging your student leadership position, like Ted Lasso leveraged his position as a football coach to a Premier League soccer coach. Like I said, we'll talk more about that, and we'll actually have more resources for you to walk away with and work on your resume and work on the next steps.